Pride is one of the greatest shadow behaviors of all. Ask Satan. There's a lot that comes out of pride, and there are different sides to pride. We have false humility, and that is a shadow behavior from that women will show when they come from rejection and abandonment. This causes them to explain themselves over and over because they care what other people think. The next set of shadow behaviors come from the emotionally immature or ignorant Christian. This is what that person does. They shut down. So they're in a conflict, they shut down, or they avoid the conflict altogether, or they spout out some very harsh criticism. Usually it comes with a little bit of cussing. Or they'll try stonewalling, blame shifting. There's a lot of emotional volatility. Or they'll use manipulation or passive aggressive communication. So this is where we get really immature, if I can just say the truth, right? And then we have repeating old patterns. This is number 7. So you start fighting your spouse, you're in the same battle with your spouse, but then you think about your past, and something in your past reminds you about how you beat that person or how you retaliated or how you were able to operate in a little bit of witchcraft to get your way. So you might that might stem from a relationship from your parents, maybe a past relationship, maybe your ex. So these are the things that just obviously come up to the surface that are repetitive old patterns. In other words, things that you brought along with you from other relationships. So the manifestations of behaviors in marriage. Now I'm going to give you a quick list, and then I have a nicely written out list that you're going to be able, like I said, to take a picture of. So when I was in marriage, let me show you a few of my shadow behaviors. If I didn't like what Ryan was doing, so Ryan used to have an anger issue. I talked about this with a lot of the women in the mentorship program, and he actually was able to share his anger issue. So this is how Ryan would show up in conflict. He'd show up very angry. So his shadow behavior would trigger my shadow behavior, and I would give him the silent treatment, meaning I would turn away and I would let him do what he was doing out of anger, and I would simply retreat, give him the silent treatment for 2 days, stay in a different room. And this was in the beginning of my true walk, but I was still very immature. So silent treatment, how many of you have done that? Go ahead and chat. Go and type in the chat. If you've ever given somebody the silent treatment, your mom, your sis, your husband, go ahead and write that out. That is a shadow behavior. How about withdrawing from something when you get overwhelmed? This actually can look like procrastination. So things get tense, you're overwhelmed, you don't know what to do, you're vagus nerve stimulated, you're high cortisol, fight or flight, so you withdraw, you kind of pull back. How many of you have ever experienced that when things get overwhelming? Instead of going in like Daniel into the fire, you retreat and go try to hide from the fire because you're afraid of getting burned. How about this one? Over controlling decisions. I'll raise my hand. Number 2, I didn't have, but this one I did. Over controlling decisions that come from a lack of trust. You know why? Because you have a pattern of people hurting you. So you try to over control. You over monitor. So you're watching that person as a protective mechanism to make sure that you are not hurt. Or we can make a passive aggressive comment. These are some of those sarcastic comments that we make out of our flesh. How many of you have done that? Sarcastic comments, maybe under your breath. How about this one? Over apologizing or people pleasing. How about over explaining yourself to people? Here's an example. Well, you know what? I really want to make a lot of money, but let me explain why, because I'm concerned about how you think of me. The reason I want to make money, Melissa, is because I want to give to the kingdom. It's not for myself. I want to be able to give to those in need. And you over explained yourself because you care what that person thinks about you in regards to that situation or topic. And I used to do this a lot, and the Lord told me about that. He said, quit explaining yourself to people that have shadow behaviors of their own, because you're going to have to over explain and continue to explain, continue to justify or defend why you believe that you're doing what God has called you to do. So over apologizing, I used to do that profusely. My husband had explosive anger, and this anger can be internal. We can have inward anger towards somebody that acts through passive aggressive behavior, or we can have an external anger. And this is what my husband actually had. And he actually used to cuss because it's a network. All of these behaviors connect to other behaviors to form this network that create our shadow self. Another one that women deal with because I work with them in the mentorship program. How about this one? Avoiding hard conversations in order to avoid conflict. Somehow the enemy told you and convinced you that you're the Christian, keep the peace, don't say anything, show them the love of Jesus, let them see you, know you by your love. And we have this, we're upset on the inside, we're frustrated, we're irritated, we're agitated, but we have to show our shadow self because we're also concerned about what they think about us because we're trying to be this cute little Christian on the outside where we're going through massive manifestations on the inside. We're going to keep going. Clinginess. How about clinginess, codependency, or some kind of anxious attachment to somebody? This is where we get into soul tie territory.